Welcome Bronco Nation to my preview for Boise State versus UTEP and my 3 keys to the game for this matchup. As you can see, I am still on the road, not in my usual studio accommodations. That's because I am heading up to watch my second team, Liberty, play. Cannot be more excited. Last week got to go and watch Boise State play. First time since 2016 I'm able to be up to Idaho, and then now this week I'm going to go and be able to watch Liberty play. But another team that's on the road is Boise State. They are going to play at UTEP. This is a UTEP team that is 1-3. Boise State 2-1, coming off a win against UT Martin. UTEP coming off a loss against New Mexico. This game is September 23rd on Friday. That's why the video is hopefully being released tonight. Again, it takes a long time to load YouTube sometimes. So hopefully this comes out tonight on Tuesday. Either way, it'll be first thing Wednesday morning, out available for everybody to view it. So 7 p.m. Mountain Central Time on Friday, CBS Sports Network. Boise State favored by 15.5 points and given a 89.8% chance of winning this game. Series history between these two teams. Obviously, Boise State beat this team last year. It was kind of a come-to-Jesus moment, for lack of better terms, for Boise State. Last season, lost to UCF on the road. A lot of people questioning Tim Plow, kind of like they are right now. Boise State plays UTEP, home opener for Boise State. First quarter is a little iffy, but then Boise State turned on the Jets. They looked really good, ended up beating the shoes off of them, or beating the tires off of them. 54-13 win for Boise State last year. Not the first game in the series. Boise State is 6-0 against UTEP. First game played in 2000, 38-23 win Humanitarian Bowl. Bart Hendricks still on the team at that point. So a long time ago, Boise State fans would love to maybe return to some of those earlier Boise State days. And this is their last chance to knock off the rust, where they have to go play San Diego State the week after this, and that is going to be a huge matchup, not just for Mountain West contention, but just as far as games go altogether. Of course, San Diego State making the Mountain West Championship game last season, Boise State losing to them on the road. So Boise State, if they want to right this ship, if they want to get fans back on board, fans obviously upset. Everything in the media circus is last weekend about the fans booing. There were some boos. They weren't super audible, but I definitely heard them in the sections I was in. But cheering when Hank Bachmeier taken out, Taylor Green coming onto the field, riled a lot of players. They didn't like that. Well, Boise State fans, if it shows one thing, it definitely shows that they are not content with the way things are moving right now for Boise State. They are definitely not content with Tim Plow. I don't think I've heard one person say one good thing about Tim Plow this season. So just like last year, kind of a lot of the same feelings, maybe not quite as bad as they are now, but definitely some of those same feelings last year after that UCF game. Boise State, and Tim Plow specifically, has a lot to prove in this matchup, a chance to right that ship, get fans back on board, back behind this team moving into a very difficult conference slate. So let's look at some key players here. Boise State, number one for me is going to be Helani. When we were previewing the season, when David Michael and I were previewing the running backs, really a lot of people mentioned it on other sections of the season preview. When we were previewing the front seven, I believe Carl Keever was talking about it. I know Ryan Dinwiddie definitely talked about it. There were lots of different players that mentioned, even when we weren't necessarily specifically discussing the running backs, was that the running game had to be a factor this year, and really how Helani did, Boise State would follow. Whether he was having a good year or not, Boise State would follow in his footsteps. Well, he has had a little bit of a rough start to this year. 57 carries, 186 yards, 3.3 yard average, only 1 touchdown, 11 catches for 96 yards, 2 touchdowns on that, and then last week being used in the punt return game, 13.8 average per punt return. Last week was his best game. He definitely seemed to step forward. He definitely seemed to step up and play with a lot more energy, momentum, a lot more of a glimpse of the classic Helani, the 2019 Helani 2019 Helani that exploded on the scene, that got a lot of people excited, and maybe the later phases of the 2021 Helani. That was what we started to see a little bit of last week. So hopefully George Helani, 110 yards last week, 4.6 yard average, 1 touchdown, 48 receiving yards, so over half the receiving yards, 12 yard average on his receptions. Hopefully he was able to use it as a little bit of a starter last week. There will be some opportunities in the run game. We'll talk about that later against this UTEP team. It's been weak against the run. It's an opportunity to explode onto the scene and get this Boise State team back in gear, because if there's one thing that can get Boise State refocused and moving in the right direction this season, it's a healthy George Helani, which he looks like he's healthy, moving at the same pace that he did in that 2019 season. If he can get going, Boise State can ride behind his momentum, and maybe it will help spark some other players such as Hank Bachmeier on this team. Another interesting note here is that George Holani currently is leading the team in both receiving yards and rushing yards. Now, it's not a lot of yards. It's 96 yards receiving overall and 186 yards rushing. But he is the leader on this team, and if Boise State can get their leader to go start firing all cylinders, they're going to have a much better season moving forward here. Another player who was supposed to be a leader this season, who hasn't necessarily been the impact player that a lot of people thought that he would be, is Stephon Cobbs. Right now he's 4th on the team in total receiving and 2nd out of wide receivers. Ashton Jeanty and George Holani are 2 running backs that are ahead of him on receiving yards. Only 7 receptions, 72 yards, a touchdown. He is right now potentially about to be eclipsed and become kind of the guy that we thought was going to be maybe the next Khalil Shakir, that next number 1 wide receiver for Boise State, has a chance of potentially kind of being reduced to the 3rd role here between Bowens and Capel. I mean, last week before he had 3 receptions and I think it was 38 yards and a touchdown, he was behind Bowens in receiving yards, and he was able to finally kind of move up because Bowens only had, I believe it was the 1 reception last week. So Stephon Cobbs right now has not cemented himself as the number 1 guy for Boise State on this receiving roster, and far from it. As we said, he's 4th overall in receiving for this team right now. If there's one guy who could make a difference, if there's one guy 2nd on the team receiving last season, if there's one guy who could change the momentum, change Hank Bachmeier's performance, it's Stephon Cobbs. Tim Plow's got to find a way to get Stephon Cobbs the ball, to get him more involved this season, to get him into being a dynamic force, yards after catch. This is your guy. Easy receptions, easy pass completions for Hank Bachmeier. This was a guy who can increase his confidence, increase his stats overall, and start moving him forward to having a better season this year. And then last week, mentioned him a few times. I'm going to mention him here. Bachmeier. Obviously, he is a guy who has struggled this year. 404 yards passing. Half of that came last week. So definitely I think we would probably say a step in the right direction. It was against UT Martin, an FCS school. So what you should have seen out of a 4-year quarterback, you did not see against UT Martin. But based on what you'd seen so far this season compared to the terrible game called, before even getting halfway through against Oregon State, and then not a great game against New Mexico, it was definitely a step in the right direction. UTEP, this is his last chance to go up against a soft defense before he has to start being able to be a quarterback performing at a high level for Boise State. So this is kind of his last chance to get away with the rustiness that he's been playing with so far. This is his last chance to shake that off. 60 passes, only 38 completions, 404 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He has not been playing with confidence. He has not been looking like the Hank Bachmeier that he was even last season. Last year, at least he was accurate. Last year, he held on the ball too long. He forced it into spots that he shouldn't, but he was still accurate. This year, he's overthrowing wide open guys. He can't seem to get on the same page with his wide receivers. He can't seem to settle into the flow of the game. He's making all new mistakes while combining the mistakes he's had in previous seasons. This is a 4-year quarterback. I have got to believe that a 4-year quarterback has it in him to turn this ship around. It's not too late for Hank Bachmeier this year. Boise State, we've had this discussion before. I'm not going to go in depth into it this video because I've talked about it in other videos. But there's not a guy behind Hank Bachmeier who can step up and take this team to a winning season, or a successful season. A lot of fans want to see Taylor Green, but he is too raw. He is too young. He is not ready. What we saw in the Oregon State game, what we've seen from him so far, definitely shows that. So Hank Bachmeier, when you talked about Holani, kind of how the team goes, how Holani goes, the team will go. Well, if Hank Bachmeier is Boise State's one chance for success here at quarterback, he has got to step up and improve, or this season is going to be a wash. So Hank Bachmeier is going to be a key player. Holani stepping up, continuing to build the momentum, continuing to reestablish his 2019, end of 2021 form, and then Stephon Cobbs being a big player here for Boise State, a guy who can take some of that pressure off of, make some easy reads here for Bachmeier and get some yards upfield. All right, let's look at UTEP because they do have some players. They've 1-3 start. They've had losses to North Texas. They had lost to Oklahoma. We can forgive them for that. But lost to North Texas and a loss to New Mexico. Well, you'd think that they have no offense. That's not the case. They actually have a pretty good offense when it comes to yards. And Gavin Hardson, their quarterback, here, 79 completions out of 162 attempts, so not necessarily the most accurate guy, but 989 yards passing. I mean, he's already at almost 1,000 yards passing. The big stat here, though, only 2 touchdowns. So 1,000 yards passing, basically, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. 3 of those interceptions last week versus New Mexico when he didn't score any touchdowns through the air. So a lot of yards in between, but not able to punch it in the red zone. Their running back, Awat, he is not necessarily having a great game great season this year either. 225 yards rushing overall, 4.3 yard average, but he's had 3 games where he was less than 40 yards in the games. So 3 games less than 40 yards overall. He's also had 2 touchdowns. And then their number 1 wide receiver here, because remember, UTEP lost their 2 top wide receivers from last season. The number 1 wide receiver this year has been sophomore Tyron Smith. 27 receptions, 437 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, 183 yards receiving versus New Mexico. So if Boise State can focus in and key in and take out this one guy, it's going to take away basically the entire passing game for Hartson. Their second receiver is I believe he's still listed as a running back, but he hasn't taken any carries. He's over 200 yards receiving for them this year, so I believe he's being converted from running back to wide receiver. But after that, everybody else on the list has, less than 100 yards receiving for this team. So I think that if Boise State can focus here on taking away the run game with Awat and taking away Tyron Smith, Hartson's going to make some mistakes, and they haven't been good at converting the yardage into touchdowns for UTEP. Let's look at some 3 keys to the game here for Boise State. Number 1, find a way to use all your playmakers. I mean, you've seen game to game where different players have been highlighted, and not just, okay, this guy's having a good game, let's keep feeding the ball. It's like, this is the only guy that we're going to call plays to. First 2 games, Riley Smith, the only tight end that Boise State will throw to. Last week, Riley Smith is out, dealing with some form of injury, I believe it was, but he's supposed to be back this week, so he looks like he's going to be back on the field. Last week, Hopper and Raftel stepping out, finally getting a chance to show what they can do, something that I've been calling for all season long, is to use all of your tight ends, especially Hopper, who is a big playmaker guy, a guy who was the number 1 receiving tight end coming back from last season, one of your top 4 returning receivers, has barely been used at all. He had a great game. Probably could have caught a touchdown, a little bit behind him, but when he got passes out in the open field, short, easy completions, we talk about the short, easy completions, Cobbs, short, easy completions, he turned them into big yards after catch and almost scored a touchdown, basically just running it in if he was tripped up just within inside the 5 there. So find a way to use all your guys. Find a way to use Helani and Genty. They both have skills that they can bring to the table. Find a way to use Hopper and Smith. Find a way to use Bowens, Cobbs, Caples, and Cutter. Basically, stop calling an offense which only highlights one set of playmakers at a time. Boise State has so many playmakers on this offense. Maybe you have a matchup you like better, so you go to that guy more. But Boise State should be giving opportunities to all of their playmakers. It should not be a case where each week you're basically just highlighting one of them, because Boise State has so many guys who can go out here and make some plays for Boise State and help Hank Bachmeier out. And that's kind of going to be the second key here, is keep the play call simple, but bring complexity to the root tree. So keep the play call simple, but bring complexity to the root tree. What do I mean by that? Well, stop calling such complex offensive plays that you have to have perfect timing and rhythm to get them right. Sometimes they work out, like the great play with Caples moving around, rotating around, pitching it forward to him and running into the end zone. But last week, when you try to run Hank Bachmeier out to the left, so he's running against the grain, he's running to the left side of the field here, and he's not being able to set his feet, and you're wanting him to run almost a Coastal Carolina-esque option play where he's going to throw it to a wide receiver who's running a go on the outside, a quarterback who's not shown the ability to be accurate this season, a quarterback who's not been able to show the ability to make good decisions and good reads and just complete the simple things, and you call that kind of play. That's not what Boise State should be doing. That play resulting in a fumble. And honestly, not surprising. I mean, even if he'd thrown the pass, it could have resulted in an interception or an overthrow probably. I mean, the odds of completing that play based on what you've seen so far from this offense and from this quarterback and his inability so far to get into a groove and to establish confidence, you don't want a quarterback who's already questioning himself out on a play like that. What you want to do is you want to call nice, simple, normal offensive plays, But you want to give him multiple options. You want to give him lots of places where he can throw that ball. If his number one guy is covered, he shouldn't be having to throw it to that number one guy or take a sack, which is what Tim Plow has been doing so far. I mean, a lot of times you see these routes, there is one option. And I do not believe it's because Hank Bachmeier can only throw to one option. We saw him making multiple reads in that 2019, his freshman year. We saw him doing that. We saw him going back and forth to his first, his second, his third, coming back to his first, fighting that guy for a touchdown. He can do that. I think this is more a reflection of Tim Plow's inability so far to call an offense that is able to utilize all of your playmakers. The interception that Hank Bachmeier had against New Mexico was, and I've brought this up a couple times, but bring it up again, because it's a perfect example where you have one guy you can throw the ball to, two wide receivers running routes, one guy running a go, one guy running a dig route about 50%. I mean, he was not running that full out. He basically just stopped and didn't even have his hands up. He wasn't looking for the pass. That ball was going the go route the whole time, double covered with the safety coming over the top, and I believe he also had a corner of free safety who was covering the route in the first place. So double covered interception. Hank Bachmeier should, if that guy's covered, he should have two or three other guys that he can look to throughout the field, tight ends that he can throw short passes to, using your slot receivers more effectively. Boise State has to find a way to simplify the play calling so you don't have to have crazy shifts. You don't have to have crazy spread option offense. I mean, if you had an offense that was clicking, if you had a quarterback who had confidence and was making good decisions, that'd be great to see that. And maybe later this season we can. But for now, simplify it. Just focus on protecting your quarterback in the pocket and giving him options to throw to, making it a more complex route tree. Not just the long pass, not just short pass, not just the one receiver, mixing everything in so he has options to go deep, to throw it to the middle of the field, to throw it to that boundary, to throw it short, and he's not having to just focus on one specific type of play or one specific player each pass. The third key here is put together a finished product. Like I said, this is Boise State's last chance to knock off the rust because Boise State is coming up against San Diego State, and after San Diego State, they have to play Fresno State and then Air Force, and then BYU comes up a couple weeks after that, a little break with Colorado State, but then BYU. I mean, this is a incredibly tough schedule that Boise State's about to run headfirst into. This is your last chance to put together a finished product. What we saw against Oregon State was not even a team ready to play. What we saw against New Mexico was a team that didn't play as bad as they did against Oregon State, but they also didn't look like they were ready to play in that one. UT Martin looked like a team that was starting to make some right decisions. I mean, New Mexico, you at least had good play calls in the end zone. You had good drawn-up plays in specific situations. UT Martin, Boise State comes out and runs a great, flawless drive. That first drive, it looked efficient, it looked smooth, put it in the end zone. Well, you know why? Because that was a scripted drive. Tim Plow came out, they practiced it all week. They were going to run that drive, those series of plays, and they did it to perfection. But that's not how you run a game. And that's why Boise State struggled after that, because after that, it's Tim Plow having to think on the spot. He's having to react to the defense, something that he has not shown himself adept yet at being able to do so far, and at least not at the FBS level, and at least not with this style of offense. Again, I've said it before, he should do what he's good at and run air raid, because at least he knows how to do that. But right now, he struggled last week, and part of it was even when Boise State was trying to run pretty good play calls, they were struggling to execute them. This is an offense that is not coming together, that is rusty. They don't look like they're in the same phase. They don't look like they're on the same mental level. The wide receivers and the quarterback don't look like they're in tune. The running backs don't look like they're hitting the holes clean. The offensive line definitely isn't dominating up front, which has been an issue for this entire time this class has been on the field. This offensive line class has been on the field. But this is their last chance to put together a finished product. Whatever Boise State fans see here against UTEP is probably not, I mean, bearing a miracle or bearing Tim Plow's just been hiding his entire playbook, this is pretty much what Boise State fans can expect against San Diego State, and that is not a game where you're going to have learning opportunities that you can quickly adapt to throughout the game. You make mistakes in that one, and you are going to come down hard. Boise State's last chance to figure things out. Like I said, last game against UT Martin. If it had been the first game of the season, that would actually looked okay because it looked like a team that was finally kind of starting to work things out. But third game of the season, you don't want to be working things out. Boise State, this is their last chance to get together a product that they can then present against San Diego State and be competitive in that matchup. Summarizing this overall, UTEP is struggling this year. This is a perfect opportunity for Boise State to come in here and get themselves in rhythm. However, it's also a UTEP team that has some offensive capabilities. Boise State's defense is the strength of this team, but they've also given up a lot of yards or a lot of opportunities through the air. There's definitely been, Oregon State, of course, exposed that. UT Martin, even last week, 4th down against Caleb Biggers, scores a touchdown. New Mexico had opportunities in the passing game that they could have exploited if they'd had a better quarterback, better wide receivers combo. UTEP has a good quarterback. They have good wide receivers. They can exploit some of those weaknesses in the secondary. When you talk about shaking the rust and putting together a final product, this is also Boise State secondary's opportunity to do that. Defensive line has looked incredible. One of the most dominant defensive lines I've ever seen for Boise State. Linebacker core, which lost, a great player, Riley Wimpy, has looked really good as well. So if the linebackers and the line have looked great, it's the secondary coverage which has struggled, which is very surprising considering how many players Boise State returned at different positions there in the secondary. Was kind of expecting that to be a little bit of a strength here for this Boise State team. So Boise State, they can be exposed by UTEP if they can step up, if they can keep them to under 200 yards passing, force some turnovers, stand strong in the end zone, in the red zone. That's going to show a lot of things for Boise State, give Boise State fans a lot of hope about the direction this Boise State secondary is moving. But there's going to be some opportunities if Boise State's not careful. So that's kind of my one concern here. Other than that, Boise State's defensive line should shut down UTEP. Hopefully they can get some more sacks. It's been an issue this year, is getting to the quarterback. But UTEP, I don't think, is going to present much of a challenge against Boise State. It's a team that lost bad to North Texas, a team that lost to New Mexico, and a team that only beat New Mexico State by 7 points. That's their one win of the season. They only beat New Mexico State by 7 points. So Boise State should be able to win this game. They have lots of opportunities in the run game. UTEP has been giving up over almost 200 yards rushing per game, 199.3 yards per game, and 172.8 yards per in the air. And I think that's more because they face some teams that aren't necessarily so heavy in the air, but it's also a defensive line here, a defensive unit overall for UTEP that Boise State should be able to match up well against. Now, having said that, Boise State offensive line looked like they were playing at the same level as UT Martin last week. I mean, they looked competitive. They didn't look like they were being dominated by UT Martin for the most part, but they also didn't look like they were dominant in UT Martin. I mean, they looked about equal, and that's an FCS opponent. So Boise State has got to fix some things here on the offensive line. If you got to put some different guys in some different position groups, if you have to just, scrap it all and throw in some new guys, Boise State's got to do something different because what is going on right now is not working for that unit. So a UT Martin game definitely was an eye-opener to how bad this offensive line really is. The fact that Boise State could not put together a dominant performance against an FCS team under 150 yards rushing, I believe was on the game. In that one, that's an FCS opponent. So while there should be some opportunities against UTEP, who knows with this offensive line. Bottom line here is Boise State defense should be able to make up for any mistakes that the offense commits. I would love to say we're going to see another Tim Plow gets it right. He figures things out. He feels motivated. He goes out there and performs like we saw last season against UTEP when he came out and put up 54 points. The offense looked great. I don't think we're going to see quite that level of perfection. I do think that Boise State showed they were moving the right direction last week. Their run game looked more innovative. Their passing game looked better. Hank Bachmeier looked like he was starting to settle down, and Holani, was playing at a higher level. I think he's going to continue to play at a high level in this one. I think Ashton Genty, when he's used, will be effective in this one as well. I think that Boise State will have a good game. I think they're going to win by 41-10. That's my final prediction here is Boise State 41, UTEP 10. I could definitely see this game going much less than that. I definitely could see this game going, low 30s if Boise State's offense continues to struggle. I mean, only 30 points versus UT Martin. But I think that Boise State's going to, this is their 4th game of the season. UTEP is a team that's going to present them opportunities, especially on the ground game, which I think is going to be leaned on here. And I think that Boise State's starting to figure some things out. Now, are they figuring things out well enough to go and compete in this Mountain West schedule? We'll find out soon enough. But this is going to be their last chance to figure some stuff out. Like I've been saying this whole video, their last chance to show the fans that this is a team that can learn from their mistakes and move forward. Let's hope they can do that on the road here against UTEP and get a big win. Thanks so much for watching my videos. Thanks so much for watching this video, and thanks so much if you are a regular subscriber. If you aren't, make sure you like and subscribe. Regular Boise State content throughout the season, 3 keys to the game and reviews of the game. There'll be a review coming for this game as well, this Friday night game. I'm excited for it. I can't wait to, anytime you get to watch Boise State play is a great day. Hopefully we get to go out and see them perform and dominate a team that is well below the level of what Boise State has consistently played at in the past. Hopefully we can see some great things. I'm still reliving all the great memories from last week, the home opener for Boise State, game I was able to be at in attendance for in person. Thanks if you were able to meet up with me. I loved it. Thanks so much. I loved taking the photos of everybody and getting to meet and chat with Bronco Nation again. It just felt amazing. So keep on out there fighting the good fight for me. Fight for us, Bronco Nation. Keep representing. Let's represent the right way. Let's support our players no matter what. I mean, even if they struggle in this game, at the end of the day, this is our team, and we need to be family to our team and support them no matter what. I mean, we can hold them accountable, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, the players will play better if they sense the fan base is behind them. So let's go out and be behind them here. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, go Big Blue!